a professional, but I've been to more than a few, including several here in Petaluma during my 11 years of residency here. I remember one that started over at the plaza in front of St. Vincent's Church, maybe around 2013 or 14, for immigrant rights. I remember another one on a Martin Luther King Day, where we gathered over in Walnut Park, and there were a bunch of speakers stressing unity and acceptance of diversity and all those nice things. I remember walking down Kentucky Boulevard in front of Copperfields with John, who owns the Aquas Cafe, and we were making up chants. And the one in particular that I remember that we tried to get the crowd going on was, "Don't be mean, it's not cool. Don't be mean, it's not cool." And then, of course, in the summer of 2020, there was the one where folks converged from both sides of town on the fairgrounds in very large numbers for Black lives and a change in our policing and our criminal justice system. Could have used that at that demonstration. And I don't know that anyone really expects, I certainly didn't, on any of those occasions, that merely by going out into the street with a bunch of people and chanting some slogans, waving some signs, that anything was going to change overnight. But when the crowds of pilgrims heading into Jerusalem for the week of purification leading up to the great Passover festival in the year 30, give or take, heard that Jesus of Nazareth, a prophet, mighty in word and deed, who had been hailed by, among others, a blind beggar sitting by the road in Jericho as the son of David, crying out for him to restore to him his sight. And he did it. For at least some of those people, there was the expectation as they were chanting their hymns of praise to God and hailing the coming of the righteous King. When they were echoing the angels' song on Christmas, saying, "Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." They did have such an expectation. The expectation that perhaps this Passover, at this great festival of national liberation, this great celebration and remembrance of God's great acts of the past, when he broke the power of Pharaoh's army and delivered slaves from their bondage and released them to go and meet their God in the wilderness and begin their journey to the land of promise and peace. They imagined that perhaps this was the man who was going to make the prophet's dreams come true, to restore the greatness of Israel, a greatness that would shine out to all the nations of the world, a greatness founded on justice, on righteousness, on brotherly and sisterly love, on equitable sharing of the fruits of the land, pious devotion and reverence before the Creator of all things. They imagined that, in fact, they were not simply demonstrating their own opinions about what was supposed to happen, but they were entering into a drama in which God would be the chief actor. And they would be there not simply as players, but also as witnesses to something incredible, something that would result in the armies of Rome vanishing away. Now, our liturgy this morning didn't end at the door. We came in and immediately began the liturgy of the Passion. Story, Luke's version of the story of what happened only 5 days later, when that same man, that one who so many thought was marked out as God's special agent of salvation, was betrayed by one of his friends, arrested in a garden like a common criminal, subjected to a show trial first thing in the morning, and carried off to face execution at the hands of that very same Roman state. It's a story that is profoundly steeped in the needs, the expectations, the experience of those followers of Jesus many years later, who had been through not only his death, but his resurrection, and seen the word about him travel out from Jerusalem into unexpected places, to Damascus, to Antioch, to Ethiopia, to Greece and Asia Minor, little communities forming on the peripheries of synagogues throughout the Eastern and even the Western Mediterranean worlds. Communities that knew that the temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed, the end of an unsuccessful revolt against Roman power. Perhaps that's why they accentuate in this story the guilt of the people of Jerusalem. Jesus' stern warnings about their inevitable and dire fate. Perhaps it's why they downplay the responsibility of Pontius Pilate, make him the reluctant executor of the sentence of death. After all, when you're trying to gain acceptance for your teaching in a world still dominated by Rome. You don't want to be openly pinning the blame for your Savior's death on those people. But the heart of this story, the historic heart, the true heart that still speaks in us, is that sense that all is not as it should be in the world. And it's that hope that does not give in to despair. There's a remarkable documentary film that you can see on Netflix if you happen to have an account and the means to live stream or stream from Netflix. It's called Winter of Fire. It's a documentary about the nonviolent uprising in Ukraine at the end of 2014 and early 2015. Nonviolent uprising that began with a few hundred students who decided to go into the main square in the capital of Kyiv, Maidan, meaning Independence Square, and have a little street demonstration to express their displeasure at the newly elected president of Ukraine's walking back away from his campaign promises to join the European Union, to form closer economic, political ties with Europe, and distance Ukraine from the era of Russian domination. The thing that was most moving, well, there are many moving things for me about this film, but the thing that really struck me was that after the state security forces attacked the square with tear gas and truncheons, beating mercilessly those young students, they fled for refuge around the corner to a Russian Orthodox monastery. It was there within the walls of this great, I should say, Ukrainian Orthodox monastery. It was there that they patched up their wounds, prayed together about what they were going to do next, and determined that they were going to go back to the square. And they invited people from every walk of life in Ukraine to join them. And they did. People came flooding into the capital from all around the country. People who perhaps had been divided from each other on political or cultural, even religious grounds. And the demonstration that started with a few hundred became thousands. And when the state security forces massed again for another attack, the priests from the monastery came out and stood with the people. It's just one of a whole series of events culminating in a violent massacre in which members of the armed forces took position on rooftops and began picking off with sniper rifles those who were in the front lines of the demonstration, those who were coming to take them to the hospital. And yet it was in that moment when the moral depravity, the senselessness of the violence became so manifestly apparent. It was in that moment that the government of Ukraine lost all its legitimacy. Jesus died, not in order to make the kingdom that he proclaimed come that day, or that week, or that year, not to make it come tomorrow, but to remind us, to show us that the God whose kingdom for whom he prayed, whose kingdom he served, whose kingdom he called us to serve, is one founded on nothing more than the capacity of any human being. The capacity to know the truth, to speak it, to suffer for it, to hold fast to it, no matter what comes. As we all know, the crucifixion of the Ukrainian people is not over. And yet, I can't help, as I've been following the news in recent weeks, but feel that their ferocity of resistance, their refusal to capitulate, is founded on that experience that they had in 2014 and 2015. Experience of a nonviolent movement that united them in a way they had never been united before. It's founded on the memory of the martyrs who died for that unity. It's founded on the hope that their deaths were not merely a prelude to more death, but gestures of love, undying, undaunted,